This video is sponsored by Describe. I'm going to be honest with you. I've had the new Player's Handbook for a couple of months now, but I haven't read it yet. I've been so slammed with all these videos I'm working on, plus a bunch of other cool stuff I'm working on for next year, and I just haven't been able to justify taking the time to simply sit down with a book. The most I've been able to do is just flip through it and look at the art. But honestly, that's already a pretty fun experience, because the art in this book is incredible. And so today I just want to talk about my favorite art from the new Player's Handbook, because this is something I've been really excited about ever since they've announced the new Player's Handbook. From what I've seen, there's only like 3 pieces of art in the book that I recognize from other 5th edition products. Everything else is specifically created just for this book, and a lot of it is just gorgeous. So here we're talking about my favorite pieces from the 2024 Player's Handbook. And make sure to stay tuned to the end of the video to hear me talk about my favorite piece of art, not just because it's wonderfully done, but also because this art piece actually settles an idiotic debate in D&D, and I am blown away by that. Also, as a note, I don't see anywhere in the art or in the credits that makes it clear which art pieces were done by which artists, so if you do happen to know who did a particular piece of art, sound off in the comments. If you want to catch my other videos, make sure to subscribe. There should be some bonus videos coming out this week. I'm catching up on some videos I had to push back earlier this month, and if you're traveling for American Thanksgiving, hopefully these videos will keep you company. But that only works if you watch them when they come out, so make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single video, and ring the bell to make sure you get notified as soon as the videos come out. The first piece is from really early in the book, page 24, and it shows 2 adventurers facing off against a Displacer beast. But they're not just fighting a monster and using their cool powers. The art itself is actually demonstrating the spacing for tactical play. If you're new to D&D and you're looking for a frame of reference to figure out how it makes sense for heroes to occupy a 5x5 space and for larger creatures to occupy a 10x10 space, this piece does a fantastic job at that. The fact that we can see the tiles of the stone floor the same way we might see the squares on a battle grid is really well done. And I also think the Displacer Beast was a really great choice for that, because someone new to the game will open the book to that page and think, oh my god, what even is that thing? And they'll get excited to fight monsters, which is what a great Player's Handbook does. It essentially makes learning about the rules actually fun and exciting. Seriously, great piece of art, really well done. The second art I want to highlight is the art of the College of Lore Bard. First of all, she's got a fantastic outfit. Second, she's performing without a musical instrument, which I always appreciate with a bard or two. In this case, she's reading from a book. This is a book of poetry, the script for a play, notes about some history or lore she uncovered in her travels. I don't know, but I really like that ambiguity, because it offers so many possibilities. The same goes for all the scrolls on her hip. I love that she's essentially traveling with a bunch of reference notes. It provides for some really fun role-playing fodder. But I also love that she's not just a lady and she's not just a black woman, but she's also older and heavier. There's some great art that offers a much broader diversity of body types and ages throughout the book. In the cleric subclass, there's a heavyset fella, as well as an older woman, but I love seeing both in the same character with this piece of art. It really helps challenge a lot of the preconceptions we have for D&D adventurers, and I really love that this mindset is being placed front and center, especially with a character who clearly has so much personality. The art just does such a great job of capturing that. Speaking of female character art, next I actually want to highlight 2 pieces of art from the Warlocks subclass. The first is the Archfey Patron Warlock, and the second is the Great Old One Patron Warlock. And what I like about both these pieces of art is just how sexy they are. Old school D&D art had a real problem with the way female characters were depicted. It was a lot of damsels in distress or chainmail bikinis, that kind of thing. For decades, all fantasy art of female characters lived in the shadow of Frank Frazetta. And I've discussed this before, but I do love Frank Frazetta's art. But it's not exactly helpful for D&D to exclusively depict its female characters that way, which is why we've left that attitude behind a long time ago. And I'm kind of oversimplifying. I'm sure someone who's familiar with more D&D products from that era could find a couple of outliers that were genuinely progressive or empowering, but I'm more speaking about the culture of the art behind early D&D, where a lot of the female characters were objectified more than the male characters. And no, they're not both the same just because the men were shirtless. Both male and female characters were presented as forms of wish fulfillment for male readers, because you wanted to be the cool, powerful male characters, and you wanted to be with the sexy female characters. But over the past few decades, we've seen a shift where female characters became less objectified and more empowered. And that doesn't mean we don't still get any sexy ladies, because I don't think that's true. However, I think the reason I like these pieces of art is because they both feel unapologetically sexy, and yet I don't feel like these characters are objectified. It all has to do with framing, and I don't know if I'd be able to articulate it beyond the fact that it doesn't feel like the imaginary camera is leering at them, but it also feels like these characters actually dressed themselves, and they weren't designed by men with one hand occupied with something else under their desk. And I really like that this book also makes it clear that this is still a perfectly valid fantasy to embody in D&D. You can just play a D&D character who is sexy and proud of it. I've run games for women who gladly describe their characters as wearing leather bikinis or boob armor with the midriff showing, so I know those kinds of players exist. And I love that they're being represented with these two gorgeous pieces of art. And speaking of powerful ladies, let's talk about the title page for the wizard class, because each class opens with a full page piece of art, but the wizard's art is absolutely my favorite. Is it just because the wizard is my favorite class? No, and also, shut up. But I love that, well, once again, this is a sexy lady. There are male characters in this book too, but like, come on, these ladies can get it. But I also love the way we see sigils incorporated into the spell that she's casting, and I love the floating spell tomes around her. It genuinely feels like someone took a bunch of the things that make a wizard cool, commanding incredible magic, wearing the robes of an academy or an order, being a nerd who reads books and maybe wears glasses, and turned them into an incredibly badass image. And also, again, this character is just wearing a fantastic outfit. I love it. She also reminds me a lot of Abria Iyengar's characters on Critical Role and especially on Worlds Beyond Number. Besides the color palette, this could be Sufi. Coincidence? Maybe. Probably, actually. But that's still cool. Next, I want to highlight this artwork of a bunch of tieflings playing cards together. There's a lot of great art in the species section, but my sensibilities really line up with this one. This is the most dynamic and the most captivating to me personally. The goal of this art piece is obvious, to demonstrate all the various looks your tiefling can have. There are 3 types of tieflings in 5.5. Abyssal, Chthonic, and Infernal. They have different fiendish origins and different powers, but they're also presented with different horn designs. And while I do kind of wish we still had some tieflings with the ram horns we saw in a lot of older artwork, I do think it was a good idea to not link those horns to a specific subspecies, so you're not steering players toward that subspecies just because they want ram horns. None of the new tiefling horns are really all that different from each other in terms of the shape, but they're just different enough to hint at the nature of their heritage. At least in the examples we see in the book, tieflings linked to devils have clean, smooth horns, tieflings linked to fiends from other planes like Gehenna and Carceri have more warped and wavy horns, and tieflings linked to demons from the Abyss have jagged horns. Those each capture the essence of the fiends in question, which is a nice way to introduce some world building to new players. However, this piece of the tieflings gambling shows that these types of tieflings can have all sorts of different skin tones. We've got red and purple and blue tieflings and even a green tiefling. And I think that's the primary goal of the art, to demonstrate that your tiefling can look however you want. And if you're a Critical Role fan, those blue and purple tieflings might make you think of Jester and Mollybach. However, something else I think this piece of art does exceptionally well is to demonstrate that tieflings can also come from any corner of society as well. Obviously, some of these tieflings are coded as scoundrels and criminals. One of them is literally drawing a dagger underneath the table. But some of the others are wearing very fine clothing and expensive jewelry, indicating that they are enormously well off. And I think that's really valuable. It's always tough to try to figure out how to present artwork of a D&D ancestry. What does their day-to-day life look like? What does a typical society look like for their people? And so I really appreciate that this art made it clear that you can absolutely find some tieflings in the shady corners of society, but that doesn't mean that all of them are unwelcome in the halls of power. I mean, that green tiefling has a cape, so you know he's important. Also, I didn't notice it at first, but the little blue tiefling on the end, the one who seems like the sweet young girl who doesn't know anything about these rough and tumble scoundrels, she's got a snake. It's wrapped around her neck. That's not a scarf, it's a snake. You can see its head in her lap. And like, that's just a really cool detail. They didn't have to give her a snake. That was a choice. That snake is a statement. Next, we have the art piece that I really wanted to talk about, the reason I made this video at all. A piece of art so good, so clear, that it will literally end arguments at the game table. I'm talking, of course, about the art for the spell, Daylight. And I'll just quote the caption here because it sums it up pretty well. An elf cleric uses the spell Daylight to bring the light of dawn to a vampire court. And yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing. A cleric casting daylight above him and a bunch of vampires recoiling from the light as their skin burns. And this picture made me do like a triple take, because Daylight is one of the most frustratingly written spells in the 2014 Player's Handbook. It doesn't seem that way at first, until you discover that the spell Daylight is only meant to be a powerful light spell, and isn't actually meant to simulate sunlight. And that's a decision that seems tailor-made to create more confusion and rules debates at the table, because players choose the spell specifically because they think it simulates sunlight, because it's called Daylight. So it's not at all uncommon for them to cast it with the intent of taking advantage of an enemy's sunlight sensitivity, to make it easier to fight the kobolds or goblins or Duragar or whatever. And then they cast it, and if the GM knows how the rules were intended by the designers, then they're the ones who have to break it to the player that the spell Daylight doesn't actually create sunlight. Of course, when most of us heard that ruling, we replied, then change the name of the spell. If it doesn't create sunlight, don't call it Daylight. But the designers have instead decided to just keep the spell in the game, only now the spell actually does what it says on the tin. And in case there's any ambiguity about that fact, any sense that maybe we're misinterpreting it again, anyone who argues that it still works the way it did in 2014, the designers have provided a piece of art to make it extremely clear that, yes, the spell Daylight can now be used to create sunlight. And yes, that means it can burn vampires. And while I can also sit here and wonder how they're going to factor that into the balance of the game, and whether vampires spawn burn in the sunlight, but full-grown vampires don't take damage from sunlight if it's cast by a spell like Daylight, and then isn't that just the same problem we had before, so maybe vampires just take less damage from sunlight, or they have more hit points overall, but then doesn't that negate the core fantasy of vampires burning in the sunlight, which is such a central pillar of so much modern vampire fiction? But honestly, that's all stuff we can figure out when we get the monster manual. But what makes this piece of art probably my favorite in the entire book is that its presence here, next to the spell in question, is literally designed to answer a rules debate in completely unambiguous terms. This art exists to stop fights. And man, oh man, I want to give the designers all of the credit in the world for that. They knew a lot of people were probably not going to catch the change in the text. After all, there are a lot of us who don't sit and compare the spells between editions, and even if we do, it's going to be hard to keep track of all those changes in our heads. But we don't have to when it comes to Daylight. It's right here in the book. We can see the change in question, so now we don't have to tweet at Jeremy Crawford and ask him if the Daylight spell really creates sunlight and if that means it would burn vampires. We know their answer. It's right here in the book. I mean, I'm sure someone's still going to tweet at him about it, but you know, you don't have to, because they already answered the question with this fantastic piece of art. And of course, this is the downside of only looking up your spells in D&D Beyond. If you only look at your spells through your character sheet or by typing them into the search field, you're going to miss awesome stuff like this. This is why the next time I have a chance to play in person, I really want to encourage people to use physical character sheets if possible. Maybe that's a lot to ask if these are new players, and I get that. And there are obviously people who need to use D&D Beyond for accessibility purposes, and obviously that's not the type of thing I'm talking about. People should absolutely use the tool that makes the most sense for them, and that enables them to have the most fun playing the game. But that being said, for all the incredible convenience that D&D Beyond offers, and the truly remarkable job they've done digitizing their content, I love that this book is actually designed to be used as a book. The layout of this book is incredible, and there is art in this book that is really only going to capture everything it sets out to accomplish if you see it in the book itself. Like, did you know that on the very last page of this book, there's a secret surprise wolf? Or that on the insides of the covers themselves, there's this really cool subtle image of the Silver Dragon Parade? That's the kind of stuff that a digital copy of the book, for all its many conveniences, just cannot capture. And man, I really like just flipping through this book and seeing all of the rad art the way it's meant to be experienced in the pages of a book. It was honestly so hard narrowing this list down to something a little bit more manageable and more focused, because I could have gone on for ages. I could have talked about all the different adventurers and the classes, and especially the art for the Draconic Sorcerer with his top surgery scars. I love the scenery pieces in the section and backgrounds. I love the sketches in the character creation chapter. I love the artwork from chapter 1 of real people, well, drawings of real people, playing the game with their characters integrated into the art. I love the art that depicts established characters like the Ravenloft characters and the siblings from Dragonlance and Yolandi. There's a ton of great spell artwork like Shape Change, where it kind of seems like two wizards are essentially doing the shape-shifting wizard battle from the end of Sword in the Stone, but as D&D monsters. And hey, I love this little Slod tadpole from Appendix B. Look at that little guy. We all already knew that Slods reproduce the same way as the Xenomorph from Alien. They sting you, and then a tadpole bursts out of your chest. But I love that they just made him look exactly like the chest burster from Alien. Great work, no notes. And I realize this is essentially turned into an honorable mention section, and I have no apologies about that. But also, even all the little objects in the corners of the pages, like dice or masks or whatever, are really lovely. This is really a gorgeous book, and I am so looking forward to digging into the content a little bit more. You know, in reading it. But I can also tell you that all these art pieces do an incredible job of enhancing the product as a whole, and making this game feel really exciting and inviting to new players. So I just want to tip my hat to all these talented artists who worked on this book. Even if you didn't get a shout out in this video, I think you did an absolutely incredible job. And I know if you're a new player getting into D&D and building your character, or a new DM getting ready to run games for the first time, you might wish you could describe the spells and characters and monsters as effectively as this art depicts them. And thankfully, you can actually find incredible descriptions of just about anything in D&D if you check out today's sponsor, Describe. Describe is a fantastic website that hosts a terrific team of talented writers who create professional quality descriptions that you can drop directly into your games. If you're a player, you can find descriptions of characters and spells that bring that same energy and detail and dynamism that we saw in the art in this book. And if you're a game master, you can find descriptions for NPCs and monsters and magic items. You don't have to rely on the art you find in the core rulebooks. You have access to an incredible library of more than 10,000 scenes. And you can also find battle maps that you can plug directly into your games, complete with descriptions for each region of the map. And you can find music and descriptions of other realities, and it's all just absolutely awesome stuff. And Describe is offering a discount to the viewers of this channel. If you visit describe.com/supergeek and use the promo code SUPERGEEK at checkout, you can save 10% off of your first subscription payment. Once again, that's dscryb.com/supergeek and use the promo code SUPERGEEK. Thanks so much to Describe for sponsoring this video. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments, what is your favorite piece of art in this book? What's your favorite change from the 2014 version to the 2024 version? Am I a WotC shill for saying that I like their new book? Let me know all that in the comments below. And while you're down there, make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell, and support me on Patreon or YouTube memberships if that's your thing. And join my Discord server to hang out with other awesome people and sign up for my newsletter to catch all of my updates. All those links are in the doobly-doo below. In this video, I talked a little bit about the character art that I find so striking in this book, but what if you were inspired by some of this art to make a character who didn't appear to be the class they actually were? What if we didn't tell the other players what class we were playing? Is that a good idea? I made a video about that question and a lot of people seem to like it, so if you haven't watched it yet, you can check that out right here. Until next time, play fair, and have fun.